Hey guys, welcome to the complete beginner's guide to Adobe Illustrator in 2024. I've been a graphic designer for over a decade, specializing in logo type design, and I've been using Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop and the suite of Adobe tools ever since I started. Adobe Illustrator can be quite confusing for those who are first getting into it, so I thought making a video explaining it and giving everyone a rundown of how to use this tool and how to learn to use it better will help a lot of beginners out there. So if you're a beginner designer, someone who's just working in-house, even if you're a seasoned designer and just want to learn some of the basics of a few of these tools, then this is the video for you. Just before we get into it, if you do enjoy this beginner style content, consider subscribing down below. Join and be part of over 800,000 people who have subscribed to the channel to learn more about graphic design. Okay, first of all, download Adobe Illustrator. You do that from the Creative Cloud app, which looks like this. Download Adobe Illustrator. Now, once you've downloaded Adobe Illustrator, you'll be brought up with this window. It's the new window. This is where you'll find all the project files. Adobe Illustrator actually has Adobe Cloud or Adobe Creative Cloud where you can upload your work and it will automatically save to the cloud. So whether you're on a desktop and then go to a MacBook or your iPad, it will all be there. When we press new file, we'll get a bunch of these different templates. Essentially, the way that the templates work is that they give you the most known and the most used sort of templates. We're going to go for web large 1920 by 1080, which is the same aspect ratio as this video. Over here, we have the width that we can change. We can change the actual name of this. We're going to call this beginner tutorial. And we're going to make sure it's in pixels. We can change this from points, inches, feet, yards, millimeters. We can also bring up this box here, which gives us the advanced options. This option is really important depending on what you're designing or creating in Illustrator. If you want to create something digitally, RGB is what you want. If you're creating something printed or physically going to be printed, then CMYK is going to be your other option. And the reason why we use CMYK is because we have in the printers C for cyan, magenta, yellow, and key. And key is black gray. I'm going to stick with digital for now, but then we'll explain print more later. Screen raster effects, just keep that at 72, and preview mode, we're going to set to default. Now you'll notice that we have artboards here. We'll just leave that for now. We don't need any bleeds. We're just going to press create. And when we press create, we're opened up with a window and a tab. The cool thing about Adobe Illustrator is that you get tabs just like in Photoshop. So if I decided to create another document, let's say this is an A4 document, that is a print document, we can have that open as well. We can sift through these different tabs to go to different files. Now, this looks very daunting at first, so let me explain what's happening on screen. Over here, we have our toolbar. This is where we find most of our tools, including the pen tool, the selection tool, the shape tool, and much other tools, many more tools. Over here on the right, we actually have the properties panel. This is where you'll find a lot of things. We also have the layers panel and the libraries. The properties panel are the properties of each shape that we create in Illustrator. So when we bring in a shape, such as I'm going to bring in a square, we can see the properties of this when we select it. We can see the fill, which is the color inside, the stroke, which is the line around it, and how large that stroke is in points, and the opacity, and maybe some effects. Essentially, the properties panel is where all the properties live. So if you need to change a shape, color, the stroke, you need to even transform it and make it a little bit bigger. You can do that within the properties panel. The layers panel is just like in Photoshop. Illustrator works in layers. Libraries is your Creative Cloud libraries. So for instance, if I like something, I don't know, like a color palette, like this Neo one, a logo, and I want to save it in my libraries, it means that I've got quick access to bring that back out of the libraries into my document. Up here we have a few buttons as well. The main one that you probably want is up here in window. If you can't find something that I'm using, always go to window and you'll see we get this huge long list of different windows that we can bring up. For instance, I want to bring up layers. So I'm going to bring layers up here and I'm going to drag layers out. Everything in Illustrator when it's in a window can be dragged out and back in whenever you want, and you can place this anywhere. In fact, I can bring properties out and just bring it underneath layers here. And you can see I can resize all of these and place them wherever I want on my screen. Okay, let's talk a bit about Adobe Illustrator and how it works. The most confusion happens in Illustrator is when drawing shapes of how it actually works. So if I wanted to draw, let's say, a black square, I'm going to just bring out a black rectangle here with the rectangle tool, and I just dragged it out like so. Now I'm going to go back up here and I've got my selection tool. We have two different selections. We have the selection tool and we have the direct selection tool. And you see, if we hover over these, they give us some tooltips of how this actually works. Essentially, the selection tool allows me to just select a shape by clicking on it and dragging it around. The direct selection tool focuses on the nodes. These are called anchor points, and this is the baseline of vector art. The main difference between Adobe Illustrator and Adobe Photoshop is that Illustrator is completely vector art. What does that even mean? In Photoshop, we can edit pixels. Have you noticed that when you go into Photoshop, or for instance, any image, let me pull up an image here and bring it into Illustrator. If we zoom into this image here, you can see it gets blurrier and blurrier until we can see pixels. That means there is fidelity. There are pixel counts in this image. The higher the pixel count, the more resolution it has, and the further we can zoom in. However, in Illustrator, with this object here, I'll just change the color quickly so we can see this better. No matter how far we zoom in, it'll never get pixelated. And that is because vector artwork inherently uses mathematics instead of pixels to draw. And because of this difference between pixel art and vector art, a lot of people get overwhelmed and confused. However, let me just explain Adobe Illustrator and how vector works for you really easily. I'm going to go ahead and open up a file that I've worked on previously. It's a poster. This is all vector. I can zoom infinitely into this space here and into here, and it will never lose quality. That is because each one has these sort of paths around it. You see these paths with these weird handles? This is where everyone gets a bit confused, which rightfully so. It's kind of daunting when you first look at this, is in how do these shapes even work? Well, the way that vector graphics works is through maths. Luckily, we don't have to do any of the maths. All we need to do is draw. If I bring up this circle option here, I'm just going to go to the rectangle and hold down, and we get a bunch of these options. I'm going to hold shift whilst I drag out a circle. If I select this circle and then go up to the left to the direct selection tool and then drag a selection around this circle, you'll see that we have points and what are known as handles. These are the handles. This is the point. Now, a way a shape is created in vector is through the connections of one or two anchor points. If I bring up the pen tool, which is how we manually draw a vector shape, and I just draw, I don't know, some weird squiggly line, you'll notice there that the shape's getting kind of filled in. I'm just plotting in some anchor points, and then we close the shape, and there we go, we have a shape. The way that vector works is it calculates the distances between each point and the curvature of it, and it does some crazy maths and gives you this shape, which means that we can now scale it up and down infinitely. When you're using a font, for instance, and you zoom into the font, you'll notice that it will never lose quality either. And that's because fonts use the same vector system as Adobe Illustrator. Now, the main reason why we use vector artwork is because when we're creating a font or a logo or an illustration, we may need to scale that design up or down. And also we want to have perfect resolution with that scale. Vector artwork allows us to achieve perfect resolution at any scale that we see fit. It can fit on a billboard, or it can fit on a business card. It can fit on a ring. So no matter what we draw inside of Adobe Illustrator or a vector, it can be scaled up and down. Now you see here, we've got these two shapes. We've got one here, which is a circle. Now, the way that vector works is by manipulating shapes and using these shapes to create illustrations. And this leads to more of like a simplistic illustration like you're seeing here. So I'm going to select this shape, and let's say I want to edit this circle a little bit. There's a few things we can do. I can select it, and we have what's known as the bounding box. This is the transformational box. If you click on any of these, you can transform this shape in any way you want. If you hold shift and select this, it will constrain the angles all the way through. If I hold shift and option or alt on a PC and hold shift, it will constrain it and transform it from the center. If I just hold Option, it will transform it from all sides in the center, meeting in the center. If I hold Option and move the shape, it will duplicate that shape every time I click and make another one. Now, the way that we can edit this shape here is we can actually use the direct selection tool. So when we're just moving shapes around, we use the selection tool. And then when we want to edit a shape, we use the direct selection tool. So click on this one here, or you can use A as a shortcut. Any shortcut will be directed on the actual tool itself. Then what we want to do is select our shape, or we can do a selection of something like this, so we can select certain nodes or anchor points. I'm going to select this top one here by clicking on it. I'm going to drag it down. Notice how the shape kind of works. This is the best time to learn how the pen tool and how vector artwork kind of works on a computer. When we move this, it kind of creates some strange effects here. It doesn't make sense. If I just undo by pressing Command Z, you'll notice that these handles can be moved as well. We can actually constrain, do anything we want with these handles. If we hold Shift and push a handle, it will keep it to the horizontal or the vertical axis. Or I could just like mess around with it as much as I want. The main thing is Illustrator works by just making these weird shapes, and we can start from a circle and create many other shapes from it. So how does Illustrator work for creating clean shapes? Well, there are a few ways, but first I want to give you an analogy of how I think Illustrator works compared to Photoshop. Imagine this artboard here, which is this white box, is a real artboard. It is a piece of paper that has other pieces of paper, which are your shapes on top. And they are physical shapes that you can move up and down. You can actually fit one shape on top of another shape. Like you can fit this book, and then you can fit this pencil, and then I could put the pencil behind the book or on top. Or I could cut the pencil out of this book. That is the same way that Adobe Illustrator works, it's just virtual. I've got one red circle there. If I bring in a black square, so I'm just going to draw a square, and I'm going to change the color down here to black. This black square is going to naturally go on top of this red square, and that is because of the layering system that we have. You see here on this layer panel, don't worry about all the jargon. It looks a bit complicated, but it's not. Layer 1 is here. And you will be in layer 1, so we're going to press this button and it will give us the individual layers. You can see we've got the rectangle here and then we've got the red circle there. The red circle is behind the rectangle, so therefore if we were to move this square, it's always going to be on top. However, if I go to this rectangle here and just drag it below the square or the circle even, we will see that it's now always behind the square. So this is how it actually works. In Illustrator, it's like physical, but it's digital, making it easy. And we can do the same again. We can bring the rectangle on top. We can bring it behind. We can also select one shape, right click on that shape, and we get a bunch of different settings here. Don't worry too much about these settings. All you should do if you want to change where something is layered is go down to Arrange, and then we can bring to front, bring forward, send backwards, or send to back. Bring to front will mean that it will come right to the front of the layering system. Bring forward will bring it one layer up, forward to you. Send backward will bring it right to the back of the layering system, and send back will send it back just one. So let's just bring it to front, and there you go, it's brought to front. Now, something you may have noticed during all of this is this weird box that follows you around. Whenever you click on a shape, you'll get this contextual taskbar or this contextual bar. This is quite recent and new to Adobe Illustrator, and it is very helpful for beginners because it has everything you could ever need, really, for quick work inside of this taskbar. Let's go through it. First of all, we have generate. This generate is the text to vector generative button, and we can actually generate something inside of this rectangle. We can write dark moon, and we can select the subject, the scene, icon, or a pattern. We're just going to create a scene, and we can actually take a style as well from another image. But we're just going to press generate, and you will get this box that pops up. Generative AI and Adobe Apps. You are signing here that you're going to use it correctly, so make sure you read the license before agreeing and using it. Now it's going to go ahead and generate it, and you'll see this loading bar, and it depends on how fast your internet connection is and how fast Adobe is at generating your prompt. But you'll see here that we get a fully text to vector dark moon prompt, which has been created for you. If we click on this and we go to the properties panel to the right, and again, if you don't see the properties panel, go up to window and then go down to properties and you'll see it pop up. So we select this, and now we can actually change through the variations that it's created for us. We can even create a detail in vector graphics, so we can bring the detail down or we can bring it right up to complex. So this box here has everything you need. We have generate beta, we have edit path. When you press this, it will automatically just give you the direct selection tool, which is pretty nice. Over here, we have repeat object. And what this allows us to do is if I just scale this down a little bit, if I press repeat, we'll get the radial, grid, and mirror. Let's do radial. This will create a radial grid around this object here. It might look a bit strange right now, but if I press this down, you can see that this is changing the instances, which is the duplicates of this square. And the more we bring it up and down, the more we get. If we press this one here, it will actually increase the space, the circumference of the whole thing. And we can get some fine tuning here. This one shows us how many we want. If we want to cut it in half or something, or maybe we just want half of it like so, then we can increase it here and then bring it around. And we can still move this up and down like so. We can create some interesting patterns and visuals within this. This button here will duplicate the object. So if you press that button, you might see nothing's happened. But in fact, if we look at the layer panel, as I'm pressing this button, we have duplicated it. If we press this button here, it will lock the shape. Now, no matter what I do, I can't select this with the selection tool or the direct selection tool. That's because in the layers panel, you'll see this little lock button here. This lock button determines that whether a shape is locked or not. And this can be very useful when designing things like this, when we've got a background here, but let's say we want to select all of these mountains here and I haven't layered them correctly. They're all in this kind of just one huge layer here. I don't want to go through and find it. So what I want to do is select this object and we can go ahead and lock it. So now we don't select the background object or even this object. I don't want to select that. I just want to select these mountains here. Now notice when I select these mountains, the contextual bar will change and it will give us new things we can do. For instance, we have generative beta, which is already there. We also have now recolor, which is different, and group. These two are very different. Let's go through them differently. Group does exactly what you think. It will group objects into a layering system to which will group them together so you can make edits on the fly and transform it on the fly. This is great for just organizing similar objects. So let's go ahead and select these. I'm going to hold shift and select this one, and I know they're selected because I can see the outlines there. I'm then going to press group. That means now when I select them, they will all move as one. But as well as that, we can check if it's a group by going to the layer panel, going down, we can find the group. Where is the group? Here it is. This is the group. And within that group, it has got all of the layers. So this is a great way of organizing your layering system throughout the project. Now, when you're in a group and you want to change just one item, there's a few things you can do. We can either ungroup the whole group, and that will mean that we can go ahead and change that one item. But that's a bit annoying. Instead, we're going to go into isolation mode, which sounds really complicated, but it's not. So click the group, then find the shape that you want to edit. I want to edit this one here. Well, I'm going to double click this, and when I double click it, it will just pop out in front of me. The background will go kind of a gray color. And then now we can actually go through this entire group and select all the objects, make our changes. To zoom in, I'm going to press Z, or we're going to go to this microfine glass and we're going to just scroll in like so. Well, not even scrolling, we're just clicking and dragging. If we want to move around, we're going to hold the spacebar button, which is pan. And when we hold that and click, it will allow us to pan around. So zooming, panning. Now I can go to my direct selection tool and make any of these changes that I want. Maybe I want this to be, I don't know, like slightly nicer looking, like a tooth. Maybe it just doesn't fit right. But you see the level of precision we have. I can also select an anchor point here and use my, you won't see it very much, but use my arrow keys down at the bottom to go left and right. When I'm done, you can see here, I'm going to just press layer 1 and I'm going to press escape, and we have escaped and we have the edit that we've made. So now we can go through this and we can select certain shapes. We can highlight and drag. If we want to be more precise, we can go ahead and click and shift click. But I prefer to drag because there's normally shapes within shapes, and press group. Now, whenever we group them, we can just move them all together as one. Group, group, group. Vector programs have what are known as Boolean options. And this is where I normally lose people, or people get lost when it comes to vector artwork. Boolean is essentially just a yes or no, a true false kind of equation. I'm going to go up here to window and I'm going to go down to something called Pathfinder to show you. This is an old sort of tool. We don't really use it all the time anymore. However, it is incredibly useful and it's vital for you to understand in order for you to get a good picture of how Illustrator really works. Let me delete these shapes. Let's say I want to create a target. So I know that I want a circle and then I kind of want a white circle. So what I can do is I can highlight this, press Command C to copy it and Command F to paste. When we press Command F, it means paste in front. If we press Command B, that would be paste behind. Same as the ordering of the shapes. If we press Command V, it will appear somewhere random. So now that I've got two, I'm going to go ahead and scale down by pressing Shift and Alt. I can scale this down to about here, and it's still black, so you can't see anything other than the outline. There are a few things we could do. You might think going over to your color panel and double clicking on it, dragging it up to white and pressing OK will do the job. And yeah, it looks like it's being cut out of the black. However, remember when I said Illustrator is very literal. It's like paper. It's like real life. We physically need this to be cut out. Right now, if I drag this over and off the artboard, you'll see there is a white spot that we can move around. That's not what we want. We want this to be cut out so we get the background gray in this black. Otherwise, whenever we print this or put it onto a poster or put it onto any sort of media, you'll see this white object. It won't actually be white. Sure, you could go ahead and click this and press the eyedropper tool or I, and then click the background to get the color, and it will look like it's been cut out, but it's not, because if we drag it back to the white, it's not being cut out. What we need to do is find a way to cut this shape out exactly. There are a few ways we could do it. The noob way of doing it would be using an eraser. So we could make guides out of this and use an eraser, but that's just silly. Instead, what we want to do is select both shapes. The great thing about the selection tool is when we drag, we select both things. When we click, we can click one. Select both shapes, and we know they're selected because we can move them. In the Pathfinder tool, we have a bunch of icons that look hella confusing. Don't be confused, it's all good. Let me explain them. We're going to go ahead and duplicate these like so. So we have a few options to go off. If I highlight this and then go to this Pathfinder option here, it will highlight Unite and it will say option click to create a compound shape path. Disregard that, don't worry. If I press Unite, what will happen is the top shape will unite with the background shape. So kind of fusing them together. Let me show you this again. Let me just drag this circle, which is on top of this black one. Select both of them. If you don't select both of them, it will not work. Press Unite, and you'll notice it will turn gray because the top object is gray, and it will physically fuse them together. We know this because if you go into the direct selection tool here and drag over, it's actually created the paths for us and fused it all for us together. But what if we want to cut it out? Well, that's where the next one comes in. This one is called minus front. Now, remember when we talked about the arrangement of the front to back? Well, minus front literally means it will minus the front shape from the back, deleting the back shape. So I'm going to select both shapes and we're going to go ahead and press minus front, and you'll notice that it will turn white or turn out whatever the background color is. And that is because there is nothing in this section here. You can see it as me going over the artboard. There is nothing in there. It has been cut from the shape. This is really useful because it allows us to create geometric changes to a shape by a click of a button without any guesswork. We know it's perfectly done. Now this next one here is called intersect. This has another function, and again, it's a yes or no mathematical equation. If I highlight both of these shapes, no matter where they are next to each other, they have to be kind of on top of each other. What it will do is it will find the intersection and delete it. It will not worry about the outside section here, and it won't worry about this. It will only worry about this area here, and that is because it's intersect. So let's press intersect. Boom. That is going to delete everything other than what has intersected in between. If I press exclude, it will actually exclude what is intersected instead of taking it and making it its own shape. These other ones down here, such as divide, when you press it, it feels like nothing's happened. However, what has actually happened is it has divided each shape. And we know this because if we press ungroup, because it's automatically created a group, and we move this, it has basically done a cookie cutter stamp and allows us to move these shapes like so. So that has divided the shapes by the cut points. Interesting. The good news is that you don't need to know any of that. And that is because Illustrator is far too easy nowadays. It has come a long way. Let's create that example of the target again. I'm going to select this. I'm going to create a duplicate by pressing this contextual bar. I'm going to hold Option and Shift to drag this down. Select both shapes, and instead of going to the Pathfinder tool, we're going to delete that. We're going to press Shift and M, or go over to the left here, and we get this cool thing called the Shape Builder tool. This allows us to more modernly do the same thing as a Pathfinder tool, but without knowing all the little icons and buttons. Let me explain. Now we're on the Shape Builder tool, our cursor has gone to a crosshair. Now, when we highlight the shape, you'll notice that it's understood which shape is which. And if I click the shape, you'll notice what will happen. If I drag, it will unite them. If I click this shape, it won't do much. It will actually take out the back of that shape, but intersect it. If I hold Option and click, it will minus that shape from it. The great thing about this is that we can actually create a bunch of shapes, like random shapes, like so, highlight them all, press Shift and M, and with this tool, we can, whenever we want to, we can delete a shape if we want to from here, or we can add this shape in like so. And we're doing this by dragging like so. Or if we want to, we can delete this out one with the Option button. And then with this one here, we can just bring together like so. And we can even delete that one too. We can create any shape we want with mathematical precision now. So I hope you enjoyed lesson 1 in the beginner's guide to Adobe Illustrator. I know it was long. Thank you so much for watching. If you did, write down below orange, because that's my brand color, and also lets me know that you've watched to this point. If you've got any questions, please leave them in the comments. If not me, someone from the community or in my subscribers channels will happily answer for you. Subscribe so you don't miss the next part of this. And my whole goal here is to teach you Adobe Illustrator like a pro. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
Yeah.